Hello, everyone. Welcome to another film study for 11 Warriors. I am Kyle Jones. Today we are, of course, reviewing Ohio State's 34-16 victory over the Illinois Fighting Illini. Now, this was a good win for the Buckeyes on the road against a ranked opponent. The Illini, of course, only suffering losses to Indiana and the Buckeyes at this point. However, I felt some Buckeye fans weren't super thrilled with the way the game played out. Now, the Illini ended up outgaining Ohio State 295 to 272, although I think a lot of that had to do with the fourth quarter when, even though the advanced stats don't necessarily count it as garbage time, Ohio State certainly treated it as such. Now, the Buckeyes capitalized on 3 turnovers. We'll talk about at least one of them here today on film study. But I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the feelings that Ohio State fans have had about the passing game, the lack of explosiveness. Ryan Day talked about in his press conference this week about just taking what the defense has given you. We're going to show what that looks like. And then some of the questions about the passing game. I think the reality is Julian Sayin is continuing to progress as a passer, which we'll get into. And then defensively, the Buckeyes gave up some points and yards early on, and then obviously at the end of the game they took their foot off the pedal, allowing the Illini to get some late scores. Right now, I think we're going to talk a little bit about what we can take away from both. But the reality is we'll see there's some executional errors that may have been under the surface that weren't necessarily in the talking points for most during this game that, in my opinion, are the things that Ohio State should really be looking at as they head on into the rest of this season. Now, we'll dig into those on both sides of the ball, but regardless, still a big win for the Buckeyes. So let's talk about what we can see from both the offense and the defense against the Illini. Now, it's no secret that Ohio State had trouble running the ball against Illinois on Saturday, but there's a couple of reasons I want to highlight as to why. And some of it was just credit to Illinois, and this is a great example of it. What we're going to see here, right, this is they're just inside the red zone. You can tell by the colored line just behind the quarterback. They're an under center. We've got 2 tight ends, and Brandon Ennis has motioned in to create somewhat like a 3 tight end look, right? And what we're going to get, though, is we're going to get Illinois playing that 5-1 penny look that Ohio State has shown so many times this year. It's a great run stuffing look, especially, if you're trying to run in the middle of the field. But Ohio State actually has this blocked up pretty well. You're going to see we get double teams front side. You're going to have Will Kazmarek. He's going to climb up and take that middle linebacker, while Indus is going to come from the opposite side and really close out the corner, right? And that should leave Bo Jackson one-on-one with the safety who's coming from depth. Again, look at where this safety is lined up, number 7 at the bottom of the screen. He's a good 10, 12 yards off the ball, but instead, what's going to happen is that as Innis goes to clean out, and again, this looks good. Bo Jackson's just gotten the ball, but this safety, number 7, who played his tail off for Illinois, he played downhill and triggered so quickly that he's able to just fill this gap and take it away. Again, we'll watch it one more time because this is kind of the Urban Meyer school of thinking of if you're -1 in the run game, even though Ohio State on paper right now, they've got 8 blockers here. You have 5 offensive linemen, 2 tight ends, a receiver acting as an essential blocker against a 6-man block, 7 if you count that corner. But this is just a great play from the safety to fill so quickly. He's not part of the box count. He's not accounted for. We've seen Caleb Downs do this so many times for Ohio State, and yet 7's playing so hard downhill that he just takes away this run scheme. But I want to show this example because Ohio State didn't just struggle to run the football against Illinois because of the box count, because of what Illinois was doing defensively. Some of this was just purely executional errors. Now, as we can see here, they're in that same 5-1 penny look. Illinois, as you can see, number 7 down there at the bottom. He's got his eyes in the backfield. But there's a couple things that go wrong here. Now, first and foremost, this is a counter scheme. This is GH counter. So the guard and the H, the tight end, are going to come across. They're going to pull across and kick out the end and lead through the hole, while everybody else on that line, they're all blocking down, right? Now, Arvell 67, the on our right side, but the left tackle is a key member here. He's someone I want you to watch because what we're going to see on this snap is it's in the shotgun and it's an away game. And because of that, Ohio State used this every single play. They used this mechanism where Montgomery would look back for Sayin to give him the signal by lifting his leg, and then Montgomery would slap Carson Hinsman to let him know now's the time to snap the ball. And it was pretty much well timed up because what we see is Illinois knew exactly when they were snapping the ball every time, and they were getting a better jump. Look, the ball is barely through Hinsman's legs. It's nobody on Ohio State has moved yet, and the defensive tackle is already slanting. He's already out of his stance. He timed it up perfectly because Ohio State wasn't varying that cadence, varying that timing. This is what happens a little bit on the road, but you can also change it and do certain things to try to draw the defense offside. Ohio State was doing none of that, and that allows for penetration because this slanting defensive tackle gets in front of Sareveld. Sareveld has no chance to cut him off. And what ends up happening is he completely drills the pulling Shabola. This is not on Tegra. Tegra gets up, looks, and suddenly there's a blocker right in his face. This knocks off the entire blocking scheme. Yes, they've got this jet motion behind, but it's a counter scheme. It's timed up properly so that as the time Bo Jackson gets the ball, there's 3 defenders trying to account for and deal with one slanting defender. The entire blocking scheme has been thrown off. You can see a lot of orange jerseys there suddenly converging on the backfield. And then even though Bo Jackson does a good job to kind of escape the backfield, he gets past that first wave. There's nowhere for him to go because by now the defense has really corralled him. He doesn't have any room. These are the executional things, the little details that Ohio State needs to get cleaned up in the run game as they move forward. Up. Now, as you can see here, this is another 13 personnel. These 3 circles, these are 3 tight ends they've got on the field. Now, this looks like a big physical run scheme, right? But that's not exactly what we're going to get from Ohio State on this play. You're going to get Claire in motion, and then it's actually going to be an RPO. And then by this RPO, it's actually an arrow little screen meant to hit Claire in the flat. He's got 2 lead blockers. Connell Tate's going to crack down on the slot. He's going to get a lead blocker in the form of Nate Roberts, kind of taking out the corner. But the whole time, what we're going to see is Sayin's reading that unblocked end. Now, that end is coming straight up field at the quarterback. And the read is very much, if you're not sure what that end, that option player is doing, and he's coming right at you, you always give the football. You don't need your quarterback taking hits. But you can see 77 and 70, your guard and tackle, Shabola and Daniels, really leading around, and that is going to create this gap, this nice gap for C.J. Donaldson just to hit straight downfield. Now, as we switch to the end zone view here, you can see a little bit more of what's happening. Now, it's not just a straight ahead run scheme. That movement, that RPO you're going to get is going to help move the defense out of in the wrong directions, right? You're going to get Roberts going to the right side. You're going to get Claire moving in that direction, of course. Now, as he comes across, it's a little bit of a motion. Coming off of that, you're going to see, again, the pulling guard, the pulling tackle. They're going the opposite direction of many of the defense. You can see in the backfield, or the defensive backfield, you can see 7, 28, 39. Those linebackers, they are all moving in the direction of Claire, right, which is actually the opposite way from the run scheme, the way it's going, right? Now, Sayin does a nice job. Again, that guy is unblocked, and he just says, you know what, I'm not going to mess around with this. But you can see already the 2 unblocked defenders right there, the corner and 39, the linebacker, they're going to get cleaned out by the guard and tackle, and that leaves Donaldson one-on-one with a safety downfield, but that's not until he's gotten a big gain. Now, we've got a nice play here from Sayin, another well-executed play by the young quarterback, but what I wanted to highlight here is a little bit of the changeup that Illinois kept throwing at Ohio State. And it seemed like the play calling from Brian Hartline never fully got in sync. And I think Illinois did a good job of breaking their own tendencies because we've got 3rd and short here. Ohio State comes out in a 13 personnel, meaning there's 3 tight ends. We've got them all isolated here. And what they're going to run is a mesh concept, right? This is mesh. This is something we've seen a million times from Ohio State. This is the classic crosser, right? We saw this, the 2018 Michigan game, Paris Campbell, all these crossing routes. This is a man beater. This is what Ryan Day and his staff call when they expect man coverage. If they think they're going to get man coverage because it's 3rd and short, Illinois likes to play man, that's what they're expecting, especially with all these tight ends on the field. But this is really meant to be a clear out route for Jeremiah Smith. We've seen Smith score on a couple of different, or we saw him score a couple weeks ago on a concept like this, right? I believe against Ohio, where it's just kind of a clear out with all these tight ends and such blocking for him, and it's really just a designed almost middle screen. But Smith is really the guy they're looking for in this concept, although they do run that wheel route at the top to Donaldson. The issue, though, Illinois is playing zone. They're not manning up. You've got these underneath guys that are all dropping into their zone. They're looking at the quarterback. They're picking up these crossing routes. And so Sayin's going, I don't really know. Where am I supposed to go with this football? There's not a clear option. Now he's going to get pressure, which will show, but he rolls out and delivers a nice ball to his tight end, Kaczmarek. Now, when we watch this from the end zone view, there's a couple things that we can also call out that, weren't really helping Ohio State. Look at where C.J. Donaldson is. It's 3rd and 1, and you're lining your tailback up outside of the tackle. He's basically a deep tight end. Now, the free safety, I believe that's what he's talking about. Now, he might have been motioned to something else, but, they're talking on Illinois, and they're calling something out. They see something about the way Ohio State is lined up that is signaling them this is probably not a run play, and let's defend it accordingly, right? Now, as the play progresses, Donaldson releases on that wheel route. That's where Sayin's looking first. The corner just drops into a deep third, so nowhere to go there. He's certainly not going to, throw that wheel route with a corner playing over the top of a running back. But more importantly, Luke Montgomery gets beat like a drum on this play, but a nice swim move from the defensive tackle, and he's got a beeline straight for Julian Sayin. But Sayin doesn't panic. As soon as he senses it, he rolls out, and then he does a nice job. He doesn't, hurry his throw, but as soon as he sees this open side, this gap to the outside on the numbers, he sees Kaczmarek has cleared the most outside defender. He calmly drops in a nice pass, which gets the first down anyway. So this is a good example of Sayin being a little conservative, which I know it's frustrating to some fans, but it's his way of continuing to move the offense without taking too many risks. Again, trying to hold on to the football, trying to take care of it, be a game manager, which I think some folks are taking as a negative, but really, again, he's not making mistakes, and he's trying to take care of the ball. So what we see here is we've got this I formation look in the backfield with the tight end, Max Clare, lined up really like a fullback. We saw this a bunch the week prior against Minnesota. Again, it's a modern I formation, essentially out of a pistol look, and that says run, right? That feels like a run concept. But what we're actually going to get here is a play action. It's a 3-level flood. This has been a constant zone beater that we've seen a ton from Ryan Day and the OSU offense over the years. Very simply, you have Brandon Inniss as the deep route. He's just really there to clear out unless there's nobody over the top. Below him, you have Carnell Tate, who's going to run a big deep out. He came on that short motion into the slot. He's going to run that deep out. And then Claire's going to release out into the flat. Now, what this run action is going to do, and this is part of what helps by running this out of the pistol or under center, is the quarterback's turning his back, and that's a great signal to the defense that this is probably a run, right? This helps sell the fake a little bit more. You've got these underneath defenders that are really kind of locked and playing downhill against the run action because they know they've got run gaps to fill. Specifically, this slot defender who I've highlighted here in the flat, he's going to be the key guy on this concept because as they drop into their routes, this slot defender, he's late to get back to his zone drop. He's really got to be that curl flat. This is a cover 3. His zone is really outside the hashes, kind of between the numbers and the hashes, right around that 30-yard line. That's where he should be. He is not there, and he's late, so he's turned his back to the quarterback. Typically on a zone drop, right, you see guys, keeping their shoulders square. They shuffle backpedaling. He knows he's so late, I got to get back, and I'm going to turn my shoulders, right? Now, initially, what that looks like is, hey, there's room for Sayin to drop this in over the top of that defender on that deep out to Carnell Tate. And I think in a more pressing situation where Ohio State had to move the ball, he probably takes that throw, right? Now, that corner could get there, and if that throw is underthrown at all, it can get batted down by that defender. But the safe throw is the one that Sayin takes, and that's to Claire in the flat. Now, it's underneath, but Claire makes a nice play against a rallying defender for the first down anyway. People don't always understand what it takes to play the quarterback position. This was a great example from Julian Sayin here, not only showing his progress as a passer, but why it's so important to make sure that he's gaining this confidence and he's doing things the right way. Now, I think, again, there's a lot of misconstrued feelings about what it takes, what guy is open, how do you find this? And this is a great example of Sayin working through his progression because he hits the top of his drop. And again, you always hear this, at least from smart evaluators. Your eyes and your feet are tied together as you work through a progression. And again, the way that the scheme and the pass routes are distributed should tie up to the quarterback's feet. Now we see that right here because the first read, He's reading that flat defender on a quick out to Carnell Tate at the bottom of the screen. He sees that corner has outside leverage and he's getting wide, so he's immediately going to move on, right? He hitches once, resets his feet and turns his hips, and now he's going to read that seam route. But Illinois, as we can see here, they've got 2 deep safeties and they're playing a Tampa 2 because that middle linebacker essentially, or whoever's in that spot, that pull runner, again, we see Ohio State run this defense a lot. He's gaining depth and he's going to take away that seam route, that little post, that skinny post that Brandon Innes is running. So what do we get? The next route that's about to come open, he's going to see this deep over. This is the third route. We saw a lot of this from Jeremiah Smith, and I think ultimately that's how he's going to make a ton of money in the NFL, is running this backside dig. We saw Chad Johnson do it for 1,000,000 years successfully with the Bengals. I think Jeremiah Smith's going to make a living for a decade plus, if not more, running this route in the NFL. However, Illinois has this well defended. Their corner's gaining depth. We've got that cover 2 safety there. But again, Sayin has reset his feet and reset his hips with his eyes every single time. So now he's going to work to his 4th progression. And what is that? That is a well-designed, it's a lead swing route. This is essentially a little screen pass where Max Clare, the tight end, he's leaked out, as has the back. There's no pressure for them to pick up. So what do? They essentially create a lead screen, and this is what creates the touchdown for Bo Jackson, right? Claire picks up the block. Jackson makes one guy miss and dives into the end zone. Now, Brutus is going nuts. Everybody's going nuts. People are ultimately excited. Bo Jackson gets the credit on this, but I love the way Julian Sayin plays this. Now, if we watch from the end zone, you can see his feet and his eyes even more clearly, right? Gets the snap, hits the top of his drop. He's got his eyes and his feet planted towards that number 1. He's looking out wide, right, to, like we said, to Carnell Tate. Resets and hitches. He's looking again at that number 10, that mic dropper, that vertical post. Look at his hips, his eyes, they are in line. Resets one more time, takes another hitch. He is now eyeing up that dig route, but he sees the safety isn't there. And then the last one, he's gonna hitch over one more time, bring his eyes with him, always staying balanced. He's always in that same exact position, right? His weight is balanced, and he's able to throw an accurate ball as a result. Great quarterback play, obviously a great run, but I just love this development from the quarterback. Now, last week we saw Minnesota start to attack some of the tendencies of Ohio State's defense, and we saw more of that from Illinois. Some of these game planning tricks are starting to show up week after week, especially as we've gotten into Big Ten play. This is a good example of what I mean here. One of Illinois' main game plans was to create these overloaded formations. We're going to see it starts as a 2x2 and it turns into a trips. Now, this is a simple RPO where they're putting Arvell Reese in conflict here, just throwing the quick screen while, Ohio State hasn't traveled with that player. We're going to talk about this in just one second. Now, Reese does a good job of chasing it down. I think this is one of those highlights that, the NFL guys love showing. But this is still a solid gain. They're able to get close to a first down. When we go back to the concept here, what is important to find out or important to see from what Illinois is doing is Ohio State's in a split field coverage. That's why I've got that line down the middle, because they're playing quarters to that top half to the, into the boundary. And then it's a cover 2 to the bottom. Now, that sounds pretty simple. It's actually one of the base calls we've seen more recently from Matt Patricia. The problem is that Arvell Reese, he's part of that zone to the bottom half, right? He's lined up as a defensive end essentially, but he's got that, he's got a zone really out towards the hashes. And as we get this motioning receiver, no one travels with him. And now Reese gets put in conflict. This is a GT counter. We just saw this from the Ohio State offense. It was almost the exact same play call where you get, this screen out to the field, and you've got a counter handoff. And now Reese stays home to help defend the run. That's what Ohio State's been doing really well, is, really boxing up these run plays. But that leaves all this space. They've got a numbers advantage because, as you can see now, these 3 defenders, they're staying home because, that's where they lined up. They're playing in their half of the field. They're worried about fitting the run. No one is traveling to create a 3-on-3, right? This is really just overloading the zone with offensive players, creating a trips look, and that leads to, what turns out to be a pretty decent gain. However, this is a place I want to, again, shout out Jermaine Matthews. I thought he played really well out of the slot. We heard that from Ryan Day. He fights over the top to create outside leverage. The easy thing for him to do would have been to run straight up the hash marks there from where he lined up outside. Again, you can see where he was here. he actually plays outside in. And what that does is it's going to force the runner to turn back, which is coming into the waiting arms of Arvell Reese. We're going to watch it now from the end zone view, and you can see a lot of similarities here and some of the structural issues. Now, Ohio State bumps down. They've already made their pre-snap move, essentially bumping into that 5-1 look. Reese is unblocked. He is the option defender. If you've got a freak like him, one of the easiest ways you can do this has been happening for 15, 20 years in football, is you put him in conflict by either staying home to play the pass or taking advantage of him with the run. Now, he stays home in this instance. You can see on the left side of the screen, Matthews is stepping up. I'm sorry, not Matthews, McLean, 18. He's going to end up stepping up to play the run here, so he's there. But your safety, Caleb Downs, and then the corner to that opposite side, he's out of the screen, Igbinosun, they're not doing a whole lot on this concept. And then this is where Matthews does a great job, right? Like, he gets outside that defender. You can see the receiver has to plant to cut back up inside, and that provides the space for Reese to get there. So, pretty solid fundamentals here. Again, undersold types of efforts. Again, from a guy you expect to be playing outside. I can understand why he was the player of the game. But again, Illinois attacking some structural issues with the Ohio State defense. Now we've got another example of Illinois exposing some of Ohio State's zones with RPOs early on. We're going to see here that, again, they've got this real spread look, a 3-by-1, 4 receivers all split out there, and that spread is really getting Ohio State to dictate and declare pre-snap what they're doing. They can't hide their attentions and disguise it like we've seen them do a lot early on. Now, Texas ran a lot of compressed sets, and that allowed Ohio State to hide their intentions a little bit more. These spread looks, even though that's not what you think of Burt Bielema, you think of him as a ground and pound physical kind of coach. He ran these spread sets to get Ohio State to show their hand pre-snap. Now, what we're going to get from Ohio State here is the cover 3. It's a cover 3 Mabel where you've got these 2 defensive backs to the bottom right. You allow your linebackers to stay back in the box, but to the wide side, you've got 2 defenders. But at the end of the day, you've got an umbrella cover 3 deep coverage with, the corners sinking and playing on top. You've got your 4 underneath. This is a 3 deep 4 under. It's a version of cover 3. Very simple, something Ohio State has really, played a ton of this season. But we've got an RPO. We've got yet another inside handoff. But in this instance, you've got Luke Altmaier. He's kind of watching and reading that backside corner to make sure he is going to sink just the way that he shows. And that's going to allow this quick slant, a glance route over the middle to be wide open, right? Nice throw, right, wide open over the middle. Now, this is also just what happens when you play veteran quarterback in a power conference, because this is actually a very nice play from Altmaier. Now, he's reading and watching those linebackers, making sure they are biting up on the play. But if you'll notice, look at his shoulders and his hips. He's pointed towards the opposite sideline, right? He's almost like if he's a left-handed quarterback, that's how you'd want to be standing. But he shows great athleticism, almost like a shortstop, where he flips his hips, right? He's able to flip them really quickly, get into a good throwing motion, and then he throws an accurate ball over the middle. Now, the receiver gets popped, but this is a nice gain for Illinois. So one of the ways that Matt Patricia combated this look, again, we're going to get motion into this trips look to the opposite side, is we're going to get a little bit of disguise and some man coverage. What do I mean by that? You've got Igbinosun right there. The receiver who's across from him travels across to create that 3-man look, but he doesn't follow. Typically what you would see is you would see the corner follow like for like, a receiver on a corner, a safety on a tight end, et cetera, et cetera. Now he's looking around and saying, hey, should I go? And they're saying, no, stay back. Sonny's going to bump outside. Now they get into their typical 5-1, that penny look. But what they're going to play is they're going to play cover 1. They're actually going to play a man coverage look here where you've got, Igbinosun. Now he's one-on-one against a tight end. That's not typically what you see. Yes, they're pressed up like this in this bunch set out wide, but you're actually going to have Caleb Downs is going to be now manned up on that outside receiver. He's the number 3, the most inside guy, right? That's the guy that Downs is going to have. But Altmaier's looking at this going, no matter what you show me, I think you're playing zone because you didn't travel. You're not matching up like for like. You've got a corner on a tight end and a safety on a receiver. That doesn't seem right. But as he drops back, he looks and goes, wait a second. They're playing man here. That's what's going on. You've got the corners that are, they're turning the hips away from the middle of the field. They're not funneling that way, right? And then most importantly, you've got these two spies. Ohio State's only going to send 4. They've got their safety in the middle of the field, but these 2 linebackers, now, they might take a running back if he peels out, but these 2 linebackers are basically not just spying the quarterback, but they're taking away any short crossers over the middle. They're really going to they're acting like double rats in this instance, right? So the quick crossers aren't there. One of those spies comes in, forces the throw. This is the play that they overturned because the receiver didn't declare himself back in bounds, right? Now, when we watch it from this instance, from the end zone, again, you can see there's a lot of communication in the secondary. Igbinosun thinks he's going to follow. They say, no, don't do that. They get into their penny look, right? Now, the key is here, the giveaway that Illinois should have taken is look who's standing in the middle of this 5-1 look. Arvell Reese is now as the Mike, and you've got Sonny Styles and Peyton Pierce lined up as the outside linebackers. That should have been the tell for Illinois that something's coming here. Something is not right, because Reese is typically one of those ends, right? He's more of a defensive end at this point than he is a linebacker, and that's what we see, because this is a simulated pressure where it looks like they're sending a bunch, but they're sending 4 guys right through the middle. Reese this time, he's going to follow behind the looping defensive tackle. There's a wide open space for him, while Pierce and Styles drop back into coverage, right? They're eyeing up the quarterback. Altmaier's forced out of the pocket, and we actually see Pierce nearly gets a hand on this ball. Of course, it turns out to be incomplete, but again, just a nice change up, really changing the picture pre-snap and post-snap for Altmaier, forcing him out of the pocket. Yes, Reese again makes a great play, but a lot of this is what is Altmaier seeing? What is he able to do before that pressure gets there? And the answer is not a lot. We've shown Illinois ran a lot of those spread formations 3-by-1. This is actually a fully unbalanced. They've got all 4 receivers and even the running back on one side of the formation, this unbalanced look. We've seen Ohio State and Ryan Day do this to a lot of opponents. It creates some structural problems for the defense when you start to line up this way. It makes them make some decisions, and of course, they begin to declare their intentions here. And that actually helps Illinois in this instance because they're going to run the football. Now, Ohio State is going to play man coverage behind it, right? They follow the receiver this time, Igbinosun. He follows the receiver across, and that's going to leave them in man coverage. You see Caleb Downs is going to bail out to that free safety. Now, the important player in this instance is McClain, because this is a straight handoff. Well, it is an RPO, but Altmaier makes the right decision to hand it off because McClain's not getting downhill. He's taking his time. He's playing essentially that rat role, which is the underneath zone, where he's looking for any crossing routes and pass coverage, but he's delaying getting into his run fit. He's responsible for that gap, and instead he's just late getting downhill, which allows for a big gain, right? This is what happens when you're putting defenders in conflict, and in this instance, though, this is not that McClain was the defender being read. There was no unread defender here. What we're seeing is that McClain's just simply got to get downhill faster. Now, we can see that the run gaps from everybody else, you can see, Jackson is trying to get across the space, but he's really playing the outside gap. The 2 tackles are being double teamed, really getting washed back, and now the 2 linebackers have the opposite side, but McClain's got to get up into that gap. He's got to come up and fill much more quickly. We've actually seen him do this many times this season. He's done this very well, but for whatever reason, he's just sitting in the backfield more content to just play his role as a rat in pass coverage and not get up there in run support. So again, we're seeing a couple different things as the game progresses and how Ohio State eventually found the balance and was able to take control before, of course, the subs in the fourth quarter when Burt claims that it was the up-tempo, but we can talk about that at another time. What we see here is, again, this 3-by-1 spread looks. We've got trips to the wide side. You got a single receiver down to the bottom of the formation, much like the last clip we just showed. And in this instance, we are going to get another pressure, this time from Matthews, once again, coming from that slot. And now this is the play where he strips the quarterback from coming from behind. It's a great play by Matthews, but I want to show how Ohio State got there, right? Again, you can see this umbrella coverage. It looks like they're doing something very similar to what we saw last time when they sent 5, right, where they sent Matthews and Reese around the edge. They played man to one side and a lot of zone, and that's what you see it looks initially like, right? It looks like they're going to play 5 over 3 with just man coverage to the bottom. Now, the difference here is as they drop into coverage, you can see it's a cover 3. This is a 3 deep, 4 under, except Kenyatta Jackson is not going to rush the passer. He's going to drop into coverage as that flat defender. And that's critical because as Altmyer works back to this backside corner, he's doing the right thing. He works to the front side, sees it's not there. I should have this backside corner because he's anticipating another man coverage. But in this instance, right as he looks at it, there's Kenyatta Jackson sitting right there in his viewpoint. He's right in his eye line. And if he's going to throw it over Kenyatta Jackson, he's got to throw a lollipop over the top, which should give plenty of time for Igbinosun to make a play. If he throws a dart, that's going to get batted down, or even worse, potentially picked by Jackson. So he kind of holds it for a second, and that's enough time for the pressure to get there, cause a fumble, right? So again, this is Ohio State showing one thing, using its own, using pre-game or earlier tendencies and earlier play calls to kind of set up what they do later in the game. Now, again, I want to show how they got here. They're showing 5. This is why we call it a simulated pressure. Looks like Ohio State's sending 5, right? You see the 2 stand-up ends. You see Reese over the middle. This is a look they have shown multiple times. It's 3rd and long. It's a passing situation. This is when you send pressure. But as the ball is snapped, immediately you've got 4 guys that were right there near the line are all dropping out. Styles is going to peel over into a zone. Reese is he's vacating the zone. You see Downs at the bottom of the screen gaining depth, and then most importantly, Kenyatta Jackson, he takes 1 step forward, and then he's going to drop back into that flat zone. And that, of course, gives enough time for Matthews to get outside. Now, Caden Curry does a good job of getting outside of the tackle, which means there's nobody outside of him to get that pressure. So, again, a well-designed scheme here and a well-designed pressure coming at the right time. Watch it again as we get Altmyer. He's gonna hold the ball, and he's going to watch it the way he just double pumps this one more time because he sees Jackson get right in his eye line, and that's enough. Now, in addition to some of those man coverage looks, one of the things that really worked for Ohio State to slow down Illinois in this game was they started sending more pressure. And in the fourth quarter, that pressure really let off, which led to some of the bigger gains that we saw in the fourth quarter that made the score and some of the success rate stuff you've seen look a little bit different. But what I mean by pressure is this is a real NFL-style pressure in the sense that they're going to send 5, right? You can see 3 down linemen. This is a 3rd down. It's a 3rd and long passing situation. You've got Matthews in the slot here. You've got Reese creeping from the top, and they're both going to come on a 5-man pressure. And then behind it, you're going to get this half-field zone man look, right? So to the top of the screen where there's only one receiver, Igbinosun's just locked up in man coverage. You can see his back turned to the middle of the field. He is trying to shove that receiver essentially into the sideline. He's saying, this is my guy and my guy alone. Meanwhile, to the bottom half of the screen, all the other defenders, those other 5 guys, now again, they're only dropping 6 into coverage. They're sending 5. The other 5 besides Igbinosun, they're essentially walling off and playing a half-field zone. You can see Caleb Downs right at the top of that eye. He's got his hips turned open, ready to kind of wall off any deep crossers, which is exactly what they're going to end up running. But, of course, the pressure gets there really quickly. Now, this pressure, it forces Luke Altmyer to kind of sit there and stop. He doesn't have anywhere immediately to go with the ball. And by the time he makes his decision, it's too late. But you can see it a little bit better from this end zone view, right? You see Downs and Styles kind of creeping up. Reese is going to come from the outside. Now, Matthews is going to try to, get outside here. Reese is really the guy who makes this play. And this is what we've been seeing from him all year long. You can see him highlighted on the left side. He just straight up forklifts this offensive tackle, right? Just gets right under him and drives him straight backwards into the quarterback. Now he gets lower. He's got good leverage. You can see those long arms the NFL guys are just absolutely salivating over. That forklifting technique, that just straight bull rush on a guy who probably outweighs him by 50, 60 pounds is what ultimately allows Kenyatta Jackson to get the sack here, right? Quarterback, he's got a duck. He tucks the ball, has nowhere to go, and Jackson wraps him up for the sack. Now, this is just, talent winning out, but the secondary is really what helps Ohio State get this sack. So as always, more than meets the eye necessarily in that first watch. Hopefully we were able to glean something new from today's film study, a little bit more of an understanding about what we saw on both sides of the ball. Certainly things for Ohio State to work on. Wisconsin ought to give the Buckeyes a nice palate cleanser as they head into the bye week. But certainly things that I'm sure watching the film on both sides of the ball, especially along the offensive line, some issues to get cleaned up in the run game. But schematically, I think a lot of the answers are there. And most importantly, the quarterback continues to develop at a great pace, right? Julian Sayin is not taking too many chances with the football. He's fundamentally sound in the way with his footwork, some of his decision making. It's there, making some on-target throws. So still more positive than negative than for Ohio State fans, although I'm sure everyone wishes every game looked like the Grambling game. They can't all look that way, and in fact, this is a solid Illinois team, regardless of what their record or what their the point spread might have been against Indiana. Now, most fans are looking towards that potential matchup, but there's plenty of time between now and then. And of course, this is not a finished product for Ohio State. I think it's worth keeping in mind that this team is 6-0, but they're planning on playing 16 games, as I talked about on the Dubcast earlier this week. So it's a progression. Ohio State, of course, trending in the right direction as the number one team in the country. We'll see how they do against Wisconsin this weekend in Madison. I'm sure many expect it to be an easy win for the Buckeyes, potentially ending the Luke Fickell era up there. But regardless, we'll be back next week to break it all down, show what we can get, show what the Buckeyes put on film. So thanks for watching. Talk to you next week.